Hey everyone, it's Gully from Ascent Astrology, and today I am absolutely thrilled to be part of the faculty teaching for Stormie Grace's YouTube Academy. I know that you guys have been getting nothing but incredible, solid information on everything from elements to solar returns, and I am just thrilled to be considered part of this. Today, we are going to be talking about how to predict the year ahead themes. And the reason why I thought this would be such a great lecture is because I remember starting out as a budding astrologer, and it would get to be about like November, December, and I started thinking, oh my gosh, what's coming up? What's the deal? And I started being so obsessive about wanting to be at parts of listening to people's panels or lectures on how they picked out the year ahead themes. And then I started thinking to myself, you know what? There's a methodology here. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to teach you how to do this. And so that once you get these 7 steps, you'll be able to apply it to any year ahead. Now today we will be using 2022 as the template kind of example, because that is what's coming up here in the next few days. Wow. But you will be able to use this for all years ahead when you start getting into this. And why it is also really essential for your client practice is because you will start getting people knocking on your door, in your waiting room, saying, hey, what's coming up this next year ahead? And so it's really important for you to understand the energies that are at play and being able to get familiar with the points in the charts for the year ahead so that you can relate it back to your clients. So that is what we are going to be doing during this elective time, and hopefully it's going to be a good time. I've created a few templates and worksheets for you to make it a little bit easier and kind of like to organize things a little bit better. So your teaching assistants through Stormie's class will be getting those to you, and hopefully you'll be able to just kind of follow along and get this all done. So without further ado, let's get into the lecture. Okay. Okay. So like I said, we're going to be going through the 7-step methodology. What you will need is an ephemeris. Now I like my books, so I'm going to go with my book of ephemeris. You can go ahead and use like astro.com or things like that. That's what I used when I first started out. But any of the good software programs should also be able to help you identify and solidify down the dates that we'll be talking about. But good old-fashioned ephemeris is important. You're going to need fantastic pen and paper, note-taking skills. And then, like I said, I came up with these ideas of the calendar wheel kind of ideas, and I will, whether you are more of a visual person, then I believe that probably the wheel is going to be the most important. I also created a Excel template for you so that you can keep track of it that way if you're more of a numbers person. I myself, I like both, so I use it all. So you're going to see my messy process as well. But I will say this, there are a lot of people who do different things. Keep your eyes open for Melanie Gurley's. She does a great article or artist representations of the year ahead themes. And I believe she's going to be publishing in the next AFAN quarterly newsletter that should be coming out at winter solstice. So keep an eye out for that too. Okay, so I will be giving you a blank representation of the wheel, and you'll be able to fill it all in with lines and planets and all of this stuff. I think it's super important to have this just because by the end, you get a visual representation of where are those energies concentrated in the year, where are they concentrated in the signs, so that you can kind of understand how things are going to play out on a mundane level. And like I said, once you understand that, then we can apply it to your client or even your own chart. This is the year ahead template that I will be using. This is obviously filled out for 2022, and I will be going through all of this with you. But I will get you both this one as well as the blank one so that you can have that for your resource files. Okay, so now you're going to see all of my mess. But this is what you should have. And I usually print out 2 of them because I need to be able to see the outer planets as well as the inner planets. I am not, it's not that big for me to be able to do everything all together. I do know that there are some who are extremely talented in that way, but I am not there. And so it's just easier for me to have 2. But I do one for, like I said, the outer planets as well as the inner planets. And as you can tell, I do both the squiggle lines forward and backwards. So it's really easy in the fact that if it's a green line, it's a direct motion. If it's a red line, it's a retrograde motion. And I have the little degrees of where they are going to be making those stations. But this is how I start to take a good look in on how this is all playing out. So the first step that we want to pay attention to will be the outer planets. So that is your Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Now, for any year, excuse me, it's important to notice, like, are they going to be making ingresses into new signs? Because that will definitely change the flavor of how those planets are going to get expressed. And I will say, do not totally stress over the retrogrades. These planets take about 6 months on average in retrograde every year. So that isn't as important. What is important are those days that they will station, because on the stationing days, whether they are turning direct or retrograde, is when the beams are going to be that much more intense. So pay attention to that with the outer planets. And for 2022, none of these planets are going to be changing signs. You still have Uranus hanging out in Taurus, you have Neptune hanging out in Pisces, and you have Pluto, God bless Pluto, still hanging out in Capricorn. Now, for those of us who do live in the United States, there are some key dates we will want to pay attention to in Pluto, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But just so that you guys are aware, these planets are not going anywhere super fast anytime soon, so they just are hanging out. Okay. The second step as we build and layer this is we want to pay attention to the social planets. And the social planets are Jupiter and Saturn. I will say, pay very close attention to the great conjunctions. And these are the conjunctions that happen between the outer planets and the social planets. There's usually maybe one a year, one every 2 years. We did have a very unusual 2020 where we actually had 3 of these all in 1 year, and it was a lot. And that's one of the reasons why it really stood out. But we will have one of these for 2022. If you are not as familiar as what the great conjunctions are or what they do, one of the best books I would refer you to is Predictive Astrology, The Eagle and the Lark by Bernadette Brady. She has a whole table in here with the great conjunctions. She talks a little bit about what they do. And I really appreciate all of her work and research into our field. But the other thing you want to look at for Jupiter and Saturn are there going to be any new ingresses? And for these two planets, we have Saturn that's still going to be hanging out in Aquarius. And he takes about 2.5 years to transit a sign, versus Jupiter usually moves along at about, he remains about a year in a sign. Now, he is going to be going through Pisces, and that has a very short ascensional period. And so his time in Pisces is a little bit clipped. But he will start off in 2022 or for 2022 already in Pisces. And we got a preview of that just earlier in 2021, where things felt a little bit more at ease. We were able to see the mask mandates all of a sudden like went away overnight, literally like went away when Jupiter moved into Pisces, which I thought was just, you know, hashtag astrology good, like we learn. But it's going to be interesting to see what he does once he moves into Pisces as well. And he's going to be hanging out there from like the 28th of December until like May, I want to say May 10th. And at that point in time, he is going to be moving into Aries. Now, that is going to change the flavor of how that gets manifested in society, because these are the two planets that govern societal reactions and responses. So, you know, when we move from a water sign and everything is about compassion and diffusion, and we move into a sign that is more about pioneering and making sure it feels significant and that it is meaningful, then there's going to be a definite shift. So that's something I would be paying attention to. He will then again do a retrograde and dip back into Pisces for a period of time and then move forward again. But so this is going to be a little bit of a seesaw year for Jupiter, but pay attention to those dates when he moves back and forth, okay? So remember how I said the great conjunctions are things that you definitely want to pay attention to. Remember 2020, we had all three of them, but as you can see, these are rather spaced out, and this is it, y'all. I mean, this is what's coming up, and this is over the next few years. So we do have a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Pisces. I want to say that is in April, and that will set off a 13-year cycle. So you'll want to pay attention to what happened 13 years previous to kind of get an idea. But what the flavor of Jupiter and Neptune conjunctions do is it's all about a person seeking a voice outside of themselves or a mentor outside of themselves, looking for somebody who is more of like a spiritual guru. And it is kind of that next step in man's search for meaning. So it is going to be very interesting to see how this manifests coming up here in April, but pay attention to that. When you do your year ahead forecast for 2023, there isn't another social conjunction. We don't have to think about that until 2024 again, okay? So step 4 is we are looking at the nodal shifts and the eclipses. So the nodes, these are the lunar nodes, they will hang out in their pair of signs and along that axis point about every 18 months. And why they are important is that they govern the eclipses. And so you want to look at what are the ruling planets of those nodes. We have the south node that will be in Scorpio, which is ruled by Mars, and the north node in Taurus, which is ruled by Venus. Now, what's interesting about this dynamic is that you have a benefic planet and a malefic planet. It's very different than where we were the previous 18 months where it was a Mercury Jupiter experience. Now which was kind of that big, small, discerning versus bigger ideas. Now we are moving into the Mars and Venus. So with this, and the guiding theory is that the South Node is the exit point. This is what comes easier. This is things we also need to get rid of in order to move into our destiny, so to speak, which is where the North Node is. These are the skills we want to develop. So things that are going to be coming up for people in 2022 is learning how to trust their gut and being honest with where they stand so that they can build, increase their material stability. It's going to be the values over the politics. Politics are something that comes pretty easily to Scorpio, and yet personal value is something that we need to be shifting towards. And Scorpio can have a tendency to blow up the whole ship versus actually seeking out what is that one treasure that will provide a basis. So these are all the things that are starting to take shape, and they will really, these themes will start to get echoed a little bit more as the year progresses with the eclipses. So let's talk a little bit about the eclipses. We always have 2 eclipse seasons a year. They are 6 months apart. And it is when the lunar node is within 18 degrees. Within 18, the lunar node is within 18 degrees of the lunation, whether it be a full moon or a new moon. That is when we have an eclipse. The closer that lunation is to the nodes, the stronger the impact. And so you even see this just with their labeling. If it is a total eclipse, that is definitely closer to the nodes, and it's going to be a little bit more strongly felt. A partial is a little bit further off. It's not going to be like a total eclipse. It will just kind of graze the side. But what we do want to pay attention to as well when it comes to eclipse theory is that, generally speaking, a solar eclipse is going to be the start of something, and a lunar eclipse is going to be the end of something. Think of these as the new moon and full moon just on steroids. They are just going to be kicked up a notch. And honestly, they do act more as bookends. They are going to be the openings of chapters and the closings of chapters. It may not be just one particular event, but you might see these in a series of events. Now, none of these are taking place on the exact same degree, which is helpful. But the reason why we want to pay attention to the degrees is that you may have like a client who is a 10-degree ascending sign, or that's where their sun is. And so that's going to be a little bit more impactful than, say, the October 25th eclipse is going to be for them. So that's why it's important. But people, especially non-astrologers, they pay attention to the eclipses. You say the word eclipse and they just kind of drool at the mouth. They want to know more. So it is important to mention during your forecasting for sure. Okay. The next step, step 5, we want to look at the retrogrades of personal planets. And specifically, we want to look at Venus and Mars. Now, Venus retrogrades every 18 months or so, and Mars will go for a retrograde about every 26 months. So they don't necessarily always line up in cycles, but sometimes they can. And with this, we will be experiencing both Venus retrograde at the beginning of 2022, as well as we're going through a Mars retrograde. And why this is significant is because, again, Venus and Mars are also the rulers of the North and the South node. So we're now seeing an echoing of things we need to be paying attention to. When the year opens up for 2022, we're already in a Venus retrograde. She retrogrades for about 40 days, 40 nights, and then she comes back. And so she's going to be in retrograde until January 29th when she comes out of that. And she rules the North Node. So this is something we need to be looking forward to. This is something that we need to be developing. She can be a little bit obsessive about this when there are North Nodes involved. And so watch for that. But what is a good way to look at this from a mundane macro level for society is to look at the dynamic between Capricorn, which is where Venus is, as well as Taurus, because that is where the North Node is. And so what are those dynamics between those two signs? Well, we know they're both Earth. We know that they trine one another. And the question that Venus retrogrades, regardless of any sign, the question that they always ask is, do I really want this? And so with that, it gives us a chance to really evaluate, do I really want this relationship? Do I really want this piece of chocolate? Do I really want this luxury item? Do I really want that material security? And it's about kind of those needs versus wants. Because this is going to be in Capricorn, we automatically know this could affect things like bosses, our work relationships. And I have to giggle a little bit because we're already seeing themes of this starting to emerge where people are asking, gosh, do I really want to go back to work? I mean, we've all been working remotely from home for so long. And now that the vaccine status are starting to take up, it's that question of, is my work family really going to be my work family? It was like we had to leave overnight and redefine that. So this is something that is going to be happening, all the way through. I don't think there's going to be a clear answer, honestly, until Venus clears her shadow. But alas, I digress. So Venus is going to be very important, especially at the beginning of this year. Okay, let's talk about Mars in retrograde. You may remember that Mars spent about 6 months in Aries in 2022 or 2020. And that was because he was in a retrograde cycle that fall. For this particular retrograde cycle, he is going to be stuck in the sign of Gemini. And that is going to be he's going to be stuck there from ingress to the time that he leaves. It's going to be over 12 months, over 7 months, a little bit over 7 months that he's going to be there, which is a very long time. We are going to be experiencing that energy. You're going to see this right when he comes in August 20th, when he makes his ingress. And then he will retrograde October 30th through January 12th. So we're ending 2022 with a retrograde of a personal planet as well, like we are this year with Venus being in retrograde. So the things that you want to look at are what's the dynamic between Gemini and Scorpio, because they are very different. Gemini is air, Scorpio is water. One is day, one is night. One is fixed and one is mutable. So there's not a lot of shared interests going on here, not a common language where they can have this dialogue. And again, why I'm saying Gemini and Scorpio is because that is Gemini is where Mars will be, and Scorpio is where the South Node will be. It's a Mars ruled South Node. So the South Node can be a bit of a cleansing piece. It is a bit of a place where we can potentially pare down as well. And regardless of where a Mars retrograde takes place, the question that Mars retrogrades always ask is this the best way to do it? If it's not, it's time to repair, redo, renovate, and complete. It's not necessarily a very auspicious time during a retrograde to be launching a new product, but instead maybe picking up projects from the past and working them towards completion. When it comes to Gemini and Scorpio and Gemini Mars, you can see somebody who has a war of words, whether that is a war of words within themselves and maybe trying to get a hold of that negative self-talk or beating themselves up, or it could be just awareness of how they're coming across with other people and their social interactions. Gemini is an extremely social sign. So these are all things that I would be looking for when it comes to this particular Mars in retrograde, but it is going to be very important. So pay attention to that. And like I said, when you look at the retrogrades of Mars and Venus, that can take a different color and shift of the year. Okay, I put Mercury retrograde into its own category. It is still a personal planet for sure, but it has its own different cognition, if you will, for this. Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year. And so it happens on a very regular basis. It is probably the most pop astro familiarity retrograde that people have. So it gives you a common language. But I want you to look at the signs, because that is how the Mercury retrograde will manifest. 2021 was very different in the fact that all 3 Mercury retrogrades took place in air signs. And so they kind of continued that same theme, versus in 2022, this is going to be straddling the signs of, it's going to be straddling the signs between Earth and air. So all of them will start in air and then move to Earth. You should be going through, yes, I'm going to just kind of back that up on that one. So you will be straddling the signs, but with that, you could potentially also be straddling the houses. So the themes of the Mercury retrograde are going to show up in what houses they occupy. So pay attention to that. Anybody who has been going through a Mercury profected year, so such as like a Gemini or Virgo year, they're going to get hit a little bit harder with the Mercury retrogrades than those who are, say, in a Saturn profected year. So that is something to also look at of when it's going to be hitting your client or you a little bit harder. Okay. The last step is step 7, and this is by looking at what are some of the dominant aspects or the sensitive points in the chart that are going to get activated. And typically this is between the outer planets when we're talking about the aspects. So you want to look at the slower moving planets like those from Jupiter all the way out to Pluto, and you want to look at the sensitive points. So for example, just trying to take this down into 2022, we still, although we have our last Saturn Uranus square that will be perfected, oh my goodness, on Christmas Eve. it's still going to be within orb of one another. And in fact, they come back really super close in October. So October might be activating that same square that we've already experienced. And so I would just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And then also for those of us who live in the United States, it is the Pluto return. Now, Pluto is such a slow moving planet that it's going to be a different sort of beast, because he can potentially grind back and forth and come close within about 5 different points, but he will actually just make the 3 direct hits, which is February 20th, July 11th, and December 28th. And so those are, I think that all of 2022, as well as early into probably mid 2023, is also going to be themes of Pluto. And you'll want to look at how control and power are getting restructured. But that's something. It may not be such a thing for individuals, but for those of us who do live in the United States, it can take on a different signification. Okay, so the next steps, now that I've kind of taught you how to do a year ahead and what are those themes, is that you want to relate it back to the natal chart, because everybody will go, oh, great, like this is what's happening, but what about me? They'll want to know that. So when you are doing client work, or you are looking at it for your own lens and your own chart, you want to be able to discuss the qualities of the year ahead. And I think that's why even having these sheets are so helpful, because even when I was looking through, I was trying to figure out like, well, you know, is anything else really going through to Gemini at the same time that Mars is? Nope, which is kind of helpful. He's going to be kind of that standalone dude, but you want to make sure that you relate it back. See if any of the eclipses are conjunct or opposite a natal planet. When I spoke with Rob Hand, he wasn't so much concerned about eclipses that are squaring, but really conjunct or opposite a natal planet is going to be a lot more of a thing. He did say he might look at some squares, but it's not all planets. So that would be something I would be paying attention to. Also see if a planet is going to be stationing on a natal placement. Like, for example, Uranus is coming into 2022 already retrograde. He will station direct in Taurus. And if somebody, like I said, has that, has it right on that Taurus place of like, I think it's 10 degrees of Taurus is when he's going to be stationing. But if somebody has like their moon there or their Venus there, then that might be something you want to be paying attention to. And I would definitely prioritize the natal's personal planets versus their generational or social planets as well, because the personal planets, they'll be able to feel it just a little bit more exquisitely than others. And I will say, pay attention to the profected planets, because that is going to also help tell the story. If somebody is in a Mars profected year, for example, that Mars in Gemini and having it be station retrograde and grinding back and forth, that's going to be a lot more significant than, say, if somebody's in a Venus profected year. They are not going to be as concerned about that Mars retrograde, but they may be affected a little bit more by this Venus retrograde at the beginning. So, like I said, it's always important that we relate it back to the person. So what I would do is make sure you get the year ahead kind of printouts. You can I'll give you blanks. I'll give you the ones that I've done. And then you'll want to plot them on the wheel. And like I said, draw the lines, see how they go. It just kind of helps you understand where the energies are going to be. And it gives you an overview so that you can put these themes out into the world and work with them with clients. I had a lot of references when I did this, and much thanks to everybody involved. And yes, thank you guys so much. You can find me. I'm available via email. I'm on my website. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, Twitter, and Stormie can always get a hold of me. So thank you guys so much. I wish you the best. Let me know if you have any questions.